Welcome back. This video we're going to continue looking at how to use methods in JavaScript. So if you watch the string method video, you will know that to do that you're going to use an object, a dot operator, and then the name of the method or property. So if it's a method, it's going to have some kind of parentheses at the end. There may be no parameters in there. There may be one or there may be more. You may have the option. So for the math class, there is an actual class called math, like there is for string or array. But instead of creating objects from here, we're just actually going to use the name of the class. So it'll always be math dot something. These are called static methods, so you just do not have to create an object first. It's outside the scope of this tutorial, but instead of creating a variable to store something, you just would say the name of the class, which is a capital M math. And from here, if you already know that, then you can just use any of these methods that already exist or properties. And we can, like we have before, you can just use an alert. So one example of a property would be math.py. You'll notice that this is all capitalized. This is actually a constant. So if you wanted to use a constant in JavaScript or many languages, you would use the capital letters for all of the letters. And we can refresh and you can see that it spits out pi. So math is your object, or it's actually a class in this case, and then the dot operator, and then your property. So we can also do this for any method that we look up. So we'll go over a couple that are going to be useful for you, and then you can look up some more, and they'll be very useful if you can just figure out how to put parameters in and know the return type. So one of them is math.sqrt, which stands for square root. So you could put a number in here like 100. So if you were to look at the documentation, it would tell you that this returns a number and the parameter is a single number. If you try to put none or 2 in there, it will not work correctly. So I'm going to comment out pi so I don't have to see it every time. I can refresh it and you can see the square root of 100 is 10. And you can try that with other numbers if you'd like to. You could also figure out the power of something. So for POW, it's POW for short. And for this one, you're actually going to need 2 parameters. So you're going to need both your base and your exponent. So if you wanted to raise 5 to the 3rd power, you would put the base first as a first parameter, and then a comma to separate multiple parameters, and then a 3. So this would raise 5 to the 3rd power. So you will see 10 is the square root of 100, and then 5 cubed is 125. So could you figure out how to do these? You could just do 5 times 5 times 5, but if you wanted to use powers and you didn't necessarily know these things, or there were really large exponents, you could try this. So if you did 2 to the 10th power, a number you may know, that will tell you 1024. So how many bytes in a kilobyte? 2 to the 10th power, or 1024. There's other useful ones like min and max, but the last one we're going to look at is how to come up with a random number. So there is one called, and we'll just see what it does with an alert, math.random. There are other classes that deal just with random numbers, but you can just use the math class. You don't have to worry about importing anything. So this will actually give you a number. It'll give you a random number or pseudo-random number between 0 and 1. And you'll notice that when I did that, I used a square bracket for 0 and a parenthesis for 1. That means that it is inclusive of 0 and exclusive of 1. So you cannot actually get 1. You can get 0.9999, but you can't get 1. But you can get 0. It's not very common, but you can get it. So if I refresh this, you'll see that I get something 0.18 and then a bunch of numbers. So is this useful? Yes, this is useful. You could just come up with 2 random numbers, and whichever one's larger is the winner. Right? So it doesn't really matter what the number is as long as you just compare if it's bigger or larger. But if you're playing a game like guess a number 1 to 100, then it might matter. So you might actually want a number that is between 1 and 100. So let's turn this, instead of trying to do all this in a print line, let's save this as var num, and then later we'll alert num. So what I can do now is, if I wanted a larger range, so instead of having from 0 to 1, I can actually say, well, I want that num to actually be whatever num was, and I want to multiply that by a number. So in this case, I'm going to multiply by 100. So this will actually now say the bottom end can still be 0 because 0 times 100 is 0. But at the higher end, this can go up to 100 exclusive. So you're not actually going to reach 100. So this is also going to give you a bunch of decimals, which you might not want. So the next step might be num equals, and we just want to round it down or truncate it or get rid of any decimal point at the end. So there is another math method called floor, which automatically rounds down. There's one called round that will round up if it's 0.5 or higher, and there's one that's called ceiling, which will always just round up to the next integer regardless of the decimal. So floor truncates the decimal, which is what we want. So we can take the floor of num. So if I do this, this will give me a list of 0, 1, 2, and it'll keep going all the way up to 98, 99. Because remember, it can't actually be 100, so the highest thing it can be is 99.9999. So taking that floor of that is 99. So there you go. Now you get a random number between 0 and 99. But if you want a random number between 1 and 100, you can just say num equals num plus 1. And that should now give you your random number between 1 and 100. And we can print out that num. And there you go, 79, 97, 66, and you can keep trying this. So this doesn't have to be in 4 steps. This can all be in 1 step. And so to do it in 1 step, let's comment this out so we can do it on a fresh time. This would be bar num equals, and then the first step was math.random. And then from there, we wanted to multiply before I round down. You want to multiply by whatever number of options you have. In this case, I want 100, right? If you wanted 10, you would put 10 in there. And then from there, I would round all of this down. So make sure that your parentheses are around that whole thing. And then when you're done, you can just add 1 to it. So this is the shift. You didn't want to start at 1, you want to start at 0, don't add anything. If you wanted to start at -20, subtract 20. If you wanted to start at 101, add 101. So if you run this and you refresh it, now I get 28, now I get 11, and you can keep trying this, 92, and this will give you a random number between the starting point and, in this case, 100, which is this number minus 1 plus this number. So 101 minus 1. So if you want to start at 1, just add 1. If you want to start at 0, don't add anything. So these were just a couple examples of math methods. And if you notice again, it's using the math class because these are called static methods, which do not need an object instantiated to run. And in the next video, we will look at using methods from the array class.